First, how's everybody doing? For those of you who are joining for the very first time, my name is Nico House. I wear a lot of hats. My main hat at this very moment is the host of the political radio show in the political news network and the sports channel Mi Casa, Es Su Casa, where I break down politics in a way that you know, or your children, or somebody who isn't very politically affluent can understand. I break these things down, I analyze them, and I give my take on modern day politics. But also wear another hat. For those of you who don't know who I am, for those of you who know, I am the one who, and all the stuff that was talked about in WikiLeaks, to make a long story short, all the stuff that was talked about in WikiLeaks, I would like to believe anyway. I don't think I was officially given any credit by the mainstream media, but you can Google it. I was the one who essentially brought all of that stuff to the forefront, questioning the partiality of the DNC, not only at the national level but at the state level, favoring candidates that were Hillary-esque, or in favor of Hillary, that were funneling money. The Hillary Victory Fund story, that was the story that I discovered through my contact in the North Carolina Democratic Party, who was very affluent on how political party funding works. So I joined up with Beck and Lee Law Firm. They kind of found me via YouTube, and essentially, after talking, we thought we wanted to just have a little conversation, and they wanted to shoot a little documentary on me, because they thought, and I thought, that that's all I had to offer, was just my understanding of the North Carolina politics and Hillary's influence on that particular region. It turned out there was more, obviously. So I started investigating into Hillary Clinton's campaign, and the questions that we continued to ask were, how can we get restitution for what we know is about to happen? Because at this point, I've donated to Bernie Sanders. Jared and Liz have donated thousands to Bernie Sanders. A lot of people have donated thousands, obviously, because at this point, Bernie had raised like tens of millions of dollars. But we realized through the research that myself and our research team had conducted, that there was no way that we were going to be able to get ahead of that power curve that Hillary Clinton had initiated 10 years ago. The people were already in place. The power structure had already been initiated, and there was nothing we could do. So we put our heads together and said, okay, well, Jared and Liz are lawyers, and they're fantastic litigators, by the way. And so we started coming up with ideas on how we could possibly get restitution and start setting some precedents that hadn't been set before. And we bumped heads. Me and Jared kind of like bounced ideas off of each other, and then we came up with the idea that the DNC does have a fiduciary responsibility to its donors, especially when it makes claims in its charter that they are supposed to act impartially and objectively, and when the DNC chair is openly saying they are acting impartially and objectively. So that's the long story short. So we take this lawsuit, we make it a class action, we take it to court, and some sad stuff happens. For those of you who don't know, the process server for that lawsuit, he died of kind of, at this point, still unknown causes. We were actually, for whatever reason, not able to get the autopsy on Sean Lucas. This is something that a private investigator, who I will not name, has tried to get the autopsy for. Jared and Liz and myself and everyone else have tried to get the autopsy, for Sean Lucas, and to no avail. So, and he was our process server once again. They did a memorial for him today in front of the courthouse. Thoughts be with his family. But there's been some positives too to come out of this, and the positives, they look good. So the first question is, how can we have a lawsuit? And this isn't coming from me. I'm not the lawyer. I helped come up with the case, but the legal jargon comes from Jared and Liz. Jared H. Beck and Elizabeth Lee Beck from Beck and Lee Law Firm. But the reason we have a lawsuit is because the Democratic Party is considered incorporated. At very minimum, they're considered nonprofit. But either of those are actually, they actually are fiduciaries. And what that essentially means is they have responsibility. They have to uphold the bylaws that they set in place and uphold the laws of the land, like corporations do, or like a nonprofit does that the Clinton Foundation has always managed to avoid to do. But that's a different discussion for a different day. So when they claimed that they were behaving objectively, when Debbie Wasserman Schultz stood on camera and said that she was not behaving partially towards one candidate, when the charter of the DNC says that they're verbatim, I believe it was something to the extent of even-handedly and impartial. When they made these claims and then behaved in the opposite, manner, that opened them up for a lawsuit, because what sealed the deal we're the plaintiff, excuse me. So what sealed the deal for us was that there was an exchange of money. Now that's another discussion for a different day as far as how much money that we could potentially win back for you all. But when there was an exchange of money, that right then became like you giving to a charitable foundation. Let's just say the United Negro College Fund. And then the leader decided he was going to pay his top 3, best sellers, and then just pocket the money and do what he thinks is best for the organization, not what the organization agreed what was best by the bylaws that were established. They led people to believe, which was substantiated by several different federal court cases that Jared outlines that he will be discussing. We're trying to set up a date for this weekend because it's going to be a longer video. But there were several court cases that said that these nonprofits, these incorporated entities, cannot mislead the public and then solicit funds from them. And so from that perspective, we believe we had a strong case. Now, on the other side of that fence, because I do want to try to tell you both sides, they are saying that their official stance, for those of you who don't know, the motion that was held today was they want to dismiss the case completely because they believe we have no grounds for this lawsuit whatsoever, and they also dispute the class. So they don't believe it should be a class action lawsuit either. But they think that it's completely bogus. But they're saying also that they don't believe that they acted impartially. Okay, look, I'm not the judge, but according to the DNC's lawyers, their official attorneys, on the record, they're saying that they didn't act impartially, or they didn't act partially, excuse me. They didn't act subjectively. They didn't have any allegiances. The woman who was hired by Hillary Clinton after being fired for being partial didn't have any allegiance to Hillary Clinton. Apparently. Now, I'm not the judge, so I'm just here telling you all the facts. This is what was on the record today. So, moving on. So, this was a very interesting case, a very interesting motion hearing, because the judge was very, very, very interactive. He asked a lot of questions to not only the defendants, but he also asked a lot of questions to Jared as well. And it was weird because it was like he was signaling, like, if this goes to trial, then you better have a solid argument for how you weren't being partial, because let's be completely and totally honest. I'm sure this judge hasn't been living under a rock. He's switched political parties from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, actually, earlier in his life. He's pretty old, but because of the actions of the Democrats, the establishment Democrats. So he hasn't been living under a rock. I'm sure he's been watching. He's hearing our references and our examples of the many times that they did, in fact, act very partially. And he starts asking questions such as, how does the DNC support state parties? So the defendant doesn't actually know this answer, which was really weird. He doesn't know anything about his damn the people that he's representing, because he actually went on record to say that he was 90% sure that the DNC does not give funds to state Democratic parties. He said the DNC does not give funds to Democratic Party candidates at the state level. He said a lot of stuff that was questionable, to say the least. And those are just some of the things that stood out to me. But some of the other arguments that he was making, because when I tell you this man was all over the place, he was, I don't know if he was disoriented or if he was caught off guard or if he's not taking this case seriously. But what he said was that he first told the judge that, okay, he does stand by their official stance, which is that they were not acting partially, that they were acting objectively. But for some reason, he decided to go on to say that the top members, of the Democratic Party, the DNC, could go back into a back room, smoke some cigars. This is on the record, ladies and gentlemen. This is the official stance of the Democratic Party, that they can go back room and smoke a bunch of cigars together and decide who the Democratic Party member should be, and we should have absolutely zero say. So what he is essentially saying is that all election laws should be thrown out the window. He's saying that the people that belong to the Democratic Party you're inconsequential. You don't mean anything to them. He's saying that they have no duty to you all. He said this in a court of law, in a hearing, using this as a reason to dismiss our case, saying that we aren't important. And probably the most interesting thing, like I said, some of these arguments were very, very, very half-baked. But he said that also there was no way to tell who was a Democrat in the country or who donated to Bernie. Like, there's a bunch of records for all of this. Some of these arguments were half-baked, like I said. But a lot of his arguments were simply based off of the fact that he truly believes, I don't know if he believes this, but this is his only argument, that if the courts get involved in this, that this would be considered like getting involved into a political, quibble, and it should be, and this is just strictly party business. So even though Republicans donated to Bernie Sanders, there's multiple classes, by the way. So there's a class that donated to Bernie Sanders, there's a class that donated to the DNC, there's a class that there's a class that donated to Bernie Sanders, a class that donated to the DNC. There's actually one more class too. Can't remember right now, but there's three classes, and it might have even been the class that donated to Hillary, perhaps. No, it's the entire Democratic Party. So the class that donated to the DNC, the class that donated to Bernie Sanders, and then the entire Democratic Party, because they were kind of screwed, which is why we had ended up with the President Trump. So anyway, so essentially he was saying that if the courts get involved, they can't adjudicate a case about whether or not someone was acting impartially. They kept saying, you can't control. This is, I'm not joking to you. And one of my supporters, or one of my friends on Facebook, Jessica, and she's actually reporting from another page, and I wish I could promote the page right now, but I can't. I'm so sorry, Maria. But I can't remember the name. But if y'all know, please write it in the comments. But because Jessica reported too. But essentially, what they were saying was that the judge has no right to adjudicate whether a political party should be following the law, following its own bylaws, abiding by the First Amendment, not violating other First Amendment rights. He was saying this like in a very condescending way towards the judge and making it seem like we were crazy for ever believing that our political party, the people that we elect, and then they subsequently get elected by the party people to those positions at the DNC committee, that we have no say. That's what their argument was. Now, their precedence was horribly weak, and I'll let Jared go into that with more details. But the precedence was horribly weak. I think they said one case in Florida with the RNC at some point, and it didn't link well, and they sounded like they had no idea that the judge was going to come at them in the fashion that he did, and I believe that because Jared didn't know that the judge was going to be so involved in this case. And this is a good thing. This is a great thing. And I'll explain why in a second. Jared handled the entire motion masterfully. I hear Jared talk all the time. I talk to him regularly, obviously. But when he gets into his mode and he knows that he's right and there's nothing that you can do about it, it's just domination. He knew what the judge would ask. He knew what the defendant was going to say before they say it. He talks about, obviously, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, which is clear, but he also talks about her official stances in the media. He talks about, in clear detail, the charter of the DNC. He talks about, because they keep saying that that's also another argument that the defendant said. The defendant said that we don't know the definition of impartiality. We don't know what that means. And then the court would have to figure out what impartiality means before that we can actually adjudicate this case, which is kind of stupid. Like, impartiality is the definition of impartiality is inherent in the word. So, yeah, but he goes on to explain, obviously, a judge is supposed to be fair and impartial. So you're essentially insulting the judge by saying that there's no definition for impartiality, and you're saying that they have no right to adjudicate what impartiality is, when that is literally the description of the judge's job. This is real life. I'm not making this up. And then Jared goes on further to discuss the favoritism of Donna Brazile. Just bringing up instance after instance after instance, and did a very good job, which was something that was very impressive to me. Because when they kept saying, you have no business attempting to interfere with party business, and he says, I'm not interfering. Like, he didn't say that. He said a rendition of this in court, but then we had a longer conversation later. But he said, I'm not interfering with party business. It's absolutely not what I am trying to do. What I am going to do, however, is sue you every single time you decide that you don't want to conduct business in a legal fashion. Every time that you do this, I'm going to sue you. We're going to sue you. So we're not trying to tell you how to conduct party business, but we will hold you accountable. Now, some people would say going forward, well, how can we say, what if they change their bylaws to say, oh, we don't have to be, we can be partial to who we choose. Now, that's a different discussion for a whole nother video, and I'm gonna have to let Jared address that. But as it currently stands, their charter, they could, and here's what's crazy. The defendants made this argument and they changed their charter earlier in the year for some other reason, like to do with funding, essentially. And that was perfectly fine. And in my head, and I'm sure Jared caught on to this too, because we talked about it a little bit. So why didn't they change their charter to just say they could be impartial? So we wouldn't even be having this discussion right now. But they did it because they wanted to appear that they were being objective, and they weren't. So you kind of put yourself in this little quagmire, in a situation where you wanted so badly to have the world believe that you were behaving one way, to have your donors, because imagine how much money Bernie Sanders was raising for the Democrats. Bernie Sanders, I think, by himself, outraised the entire Democratic Party, if I recall correctly. So, as far as like non-corporate donations are concerned. So, and they were hurting for money whenever his campaign stopped, if you all recall as well. So, it was in their best interest to ensure that everybody at least believed to some degree that there was some type of objectivity, which there wasn't. And Jared harped on all these things, saying he was knocking it home. Bop, bop, bop. And I'm like in the back, like, oh, Jared! Hoo. And the judge is just like very receptive. When they tried to pretend, when the defendant tried to pretend that he didn't know what article it was of the charter, judge is like, you mean, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember the exact, you mean article, blah, 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 section 3. Like, the judge knew. He's like, so don't try to pretend like you didn't know that you had to behave impartially, because you knew. And I'm telling you because I read it in your bylaws, in your charter. So, and then the judge would then whenever the defendant would say something that was untrue or questionable, or if the defendant tried to dodge, the judge would ask this. He would just ask the same question again. He said, "So are you saying that how?" He would say, "How did the Democratic National Committee support state parties?" And then he would pussyfoot, doing what lawyers do. And then he would say, "Okay, no, that's not asking. How does the and he just asked the same question again. And then he would say, "Do they fund the parties? Do they fund the parties? Do they fund the DNC fund the state Democratic Party? Do they fund individual candidates?" And he kept pussyfooting, and then he got back around to his circle, and it ended up saying in his argument, the Democratic Party fundraises for candidates or assists in fundraising. So you do actually assist with funding of the parties. I didn't want to break his heart and tell him that, but whatever. So what we are dealing with. First of all, this wasn't even the senior counsel. So this wasn't even the lead. They sent their B team because they're not taking this seriously. Jared described it is what I described it as well. This is a classic Fortune 500. They're trying to run this like it's legitimately a corporation. They want to draw it out and draw it out and draw it out because they believe time is on their side. But it's not. This judge had 3 clerks up there, taking everything down. They will be helping him obviously when he's reviewing. We didn't render a judgment today as far as what the motion to dismiss or go forward, because he's taking, like I said in my last videos, he's taking this very, very seriously, because this could change the fabric of democracy. This could change the fabric of the Democratic Party. This could even change the fabric of the Republican Party. This could be everything. This is a big deal, right? Which is why the news isn't covering it. This is why CNN and MSNBC isn't covering this. Like, I think a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for if the DC law statute is applied in this motion, which we'll know after the motion is taken care of and concluded, this would be 3 times the restitution. This would be 3 times what we were originally suing for. So you're talking about like close to $400 million. Who's going to write that check for them? Who knows? $400 million. So, the fact that they're not covering this shows a lot. It tells you a lot. It tells you what they're scared of. It tells you, it tells you that we're on the right track, because usually when they're not covering something, that's a big deal. It usually means we're doing the right thing. So there have been some questions, very legitimate questions, as to how we know the judge will be fair and impartial. And me and Jared both have a good sense of this judge, and we think that this judge is the definition of fair and impartial. So first of all, this judge is known for dealing with corruption cases in Florida. This is his stamp. He's always wanted to make a dent in the corruption in South Florida. He's hearing some pretty major cases that I would prefer not to talk about on this live stream right now, but he's dealing with some stuff in the Middle East, terrorist attacks and things like that. He's dealt with these things before, and it's always favored our side. He's not the type of person that is going to sit idly by and let history be influenced by the unjust. This is his history. Furthermore, you're going to get a kick out of this. He's a Republican, so that kind of helps, because I'm pretty sure he does not like the DNC. If you would have been in that courtroom, it was a little tense every time he asked, because he's like, so you all weren't acting impartial. So how exactly do you help the Democratic Party then? Like, it was funny. I was trying hard not to laugh, but I got a good, we got a good sense that he was acting very, very even-handedly. He was very detailed, very meticulous. Did not let anything slide by. If he didn't understand, he wasn't falling asleep. He was attentive the entire time. This was a 4 or 5 hour hearing. This is uncommon for those of you who don't know. For a motion, he just kept saying, well, it's okay, counsels, take your time. We have all afternoon. I was like, oh, we're going to be here for a while. What it looked like in a lot of ways is that he did ask the defendant more questions than he asked Jared. in our side. And what it seemed like it was, he was prepping them, saying, look, if this case goes through, they're likely going to win on its stance right now. This isn't his words, but the questions that he was asking, he was like, what do they do? Do they fund the party members? Do they show partiality? He asked that directly. He asked, do they fund other party like candidates over other candidates? And on record, the lawyer said no, which is factually untrue. We know this. This literally happened with Tulsi Gabbard. They pick and choose when they want to fund candidates. I know if I lived in North Carolina, I watched as they helped fund one senatorial candidate over another, giving office, Hillary's old office, to another candidate over another. I've seen it. So this is untrue. And I'm sure they know this. But this judge, he ended on a quote, and I'm going to butcher the quote because Jared told me this when we were on the phone, but he ended on a quote essentially asserting that the voters, people participating in democracy, need to be educated about the truth, and like that truth must prevail in democracy. And that's all he said, and he left. This is I can't remember the exact quote, but that was the line of thinking with the quote, and that's pretty powerful, right? So, for those of you who don't know about the history of judges, there is that fear of partiality. So if we didn't do this in DC because we're not stupid, all of those judges are gunning for the Supreme Court. We're not going to do this in New York, for example. We couldn't do it in New York. Well, no, we couldn't do it in New York. The only way we'll be able to do it in New York is if we took it against Hillary Clinton directly, but we didn't. So, we would be screwed there. Those are Democratic judges. They're good Democrats. Same thing in Cali. That was a fear for us, and that is what is one of the reasons actually why we don't want it to go to the Supreme Court. We hope that it gets settled out, but what we see is that this judge is Republican. He used to be Democrat. He is a veteran, and he takes corruption very, very seriously. So, with that being said, I think that him having 3 clerks, him asking these questions, his affiliations, things like that, kind of indicate that we have nothing to worry about in that department. And me and Jared have had a long conversation about how we're very fortunate, and it looks like history is actually on our side. The optics look bad for the DNC right now. If this motion goes forward, there's a high probability that they'll try to settle out. They'll try to settle out with the 76 million or the 100 million, and they're going to have to say, yeah, we settled because we can't win because we did act impartially. And this looks bad going forward, and this will be talked about going forward. This will be mentioned in the next presidential election. This will be mentioned in the interim elections. They will be, they will be probed. They don't settle out. I'm going to go pretty confidently with my pick, Jared and Liz and their colleagues, and say we're going to wipe the floor with them if they don't settle out. They didn't have any legitimate arguments prepared for this motion to dismiss. This would have, if this motion to dismiss would have went through, or if it goes through, this would set them home free. But they didn't have anything legitimately prepared. They think it's a joke. They think that I don't know if they've done their research on their judge, but we have them on the ropes, and I can say that I was there. We have them on the ropes. Don't let these Ivy League, lawyers and these big fancy terms convince you that these lawyers are any smarter. They're not living in the real world. I was there. Jerry was there. Liz was there. Their colleagues were there. We were talking to you all. We were doing these videos. We were investigating together. We were sharing information. We have they're thick. The information is thick. If the argument is we didn't act, because that's their official stance, that they were not impartial. Knock out of the park, baby. So, please leave any questions that you have below. Jared is actually going to come back and try to run through the comments that you all have so that he can answer some of your questions. And two more things. Me and Jared are going to try to have a video session because we both were kind of in a rush. The session ran way longer than it was supposed to, like we said. So we're going to try to do a long video, have an in-depth conversation about this one-on-one so you all can see and kind of hear our thoughts on it. And so you all know how to talk about this as well, because this is an important conversation that needs to be had. Also, we want to hold a public forum in South Miami or in South Florida. And so we're going to try to, coordinate with our resources here and see what we can do, because this is important. We think that you all need to know what you're dealing with. When we need to be able to call a spade before it gets to June of 2016, the month or two before the election is decided, right? We need to be able to initiate these types of lawsuits before, and we need to know. You need to know, how to go about it. When you're talking to a lawyer about this type of thing, you definitely want to be able to tell them, like, this is what we've seen before, this is what we need to do to move forward, and you want to make sure that you're going about it in the right way. And we can take the example that we're setting in this particular Supreme Court or federal court case and take that and move forward with it. All right, so we're definitely going to try to do a public forum, because we don't only want to hit you with all the legal nonsense. We also want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear why this is important to you. We want to hear why this case matters. Because if it does get back to the judge, who knows? Like I said, this guy's whole career has been fighting corruption. So if we can do a public forum and go forward with that and blow it up everywhere all over Facebook, that's huge for us. It's huge. So, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, the motion to dismiss is being deliberated right now. He had 3 clerks in the court, and he had himself writing everything down. And what's important to understand is, remember I told you all, we personally don't really want this to go to the Supreme Court because it gets way too political. And that needs to be understood, because it's actually really good that Obama didn't appoint the Supreme Court judge, because we would kind of be screwed. They would absolutely take it to the Supreme Court. But now it's Republicans, so we fare a little bit better. But the truth of the matter is, I don't think they want to take it to the Supreme Court, because if they take it to the Supreme Court, you have no choice but to end up on CNN. You have no choice but to end up on MSNBC, and you damn sure don't have any choice but to end up on Fox News. And that is the last thing they want, is Hannity, Alex Jones, and Rush Limbaugh talking about this Supreme Court case. Right? So, thank you all so much for watching. Share. Leave your questions below, and me and Jared will try to go through all of them and answer them to the best of our ability individually. And I'll keep you updated as to when me and Jared are going to shoot this video this weekend, and also as to when we're going to try to organize this public forum. Thank you all for watching. Have a good evening. Peace.